Every rice plant moves through the same stages, from a fragile seedling putting down roots to a flowering stalk full of promise to a mature grain. Today on The Rice Stuff, we're following that same arc, but with people instead of plants. We've got 3 guests, each standing in a different stage of their career in the world of rice. One just starting out and putting down roots, another one a few years in and coming into full bloom, and one who, after 40 years in the field, is bringing in the harvest. It's a conversation about roots, growth, and maturity. Let's get into it. First, we're going to meet 2 new USA Rice staffers and talk about a recently announced research retirement that is going to be felt across the industry. We'll meet Mollie Buckler in segment 2. She's the flowering booting one. And we'll talk to Dr. Tim Burcham in segment 3. He's the mature grain. And at the end, I'm going to share some thoughts about another mature grain who's retired from USA Rice, Deborah Willenborg. But first, let's meet our seedling, Caroline Slack, who is jumping into the breach that Deborah has been filling for 14 years. Caroline, welcome to USA Rice and The Rice Stuff.
Thank you so much.
So, Caroline, tell listeners your origin story. You're from Virginia. You grew up in Connecticut. You went to school in Vermont. Fill in the details with the interests, what you studied, et cetera.
Yeah, so I was born here in Virginia, actually in Richmond. So it's nice to finally be back after 20 some odd years. But I spent most of my childhood in the Connecticut suburbs, somewhere between New York City and Boston. And then I went to college at the University of Vermont, where I studied English. And while I was at school, I had this amazing co-op journalism internship. And I got the opportunity to report for local papers throughout the state. I got to write about environmental issues and barriers to food access for Vermonters. And those experiences really gave me a lifelong personal interest in those subject areas. And then subsequently in my career, I've sort of run the gamut subject matter wise. So I've done tons of financial services content. I've also done some healthcare communications, a little bit of writing about technology. But I think the through line in my work really is that I've always focused on translating complicated subject matter into relevant storytelling. And as I've learned quite quickly in this role, the rice industry is incredibly complex and multifaceted, and I'm excited for the challenges ahead as I learn more.
Speaking of through line, I mean, we threw you right into it. We took you to our Dallas business meetings in your first few days. You didn't even have business cards. I don't even know if you had a key to the office. You may not have had a key to the office at that time. But what was your impression? I kept looking over at you and thinking that she's a deer in the headlights and like, uh-oh. But what was your impression? Now it's been a little bit of time. So those characters you met, the meetings you sat in on, I mean, I know that a lot of it from a policy perspective and the alphabet soup of it all, like, didn't make sense. But like, what was your general impression?
Yeah, I thought it was overwhelming in the best way, because I met so many farmers and millers, but also scientists, business people, marketers, communications professionals, government affairs workers, and I'm not even covering the full scope with that list. There are just so many moving parts that make this industry possible, and it was neat to be able to see so many of them in action in one place so close to my start date.
Yeah. Well, so now you're a month into Rice World or so. You've been flying solo on the daily for like 2 weeks. What has surprised you the most so far, whether it's about agriculture, rice, or maybe working at a trade association? Because I think this is your first trade association, right?
Like many people, before I started this job, I had no idea how much of the rice in America is actually grown domestically. The number kind of shocked me.
Should be higher, but yeah.
Should be higher, but still. And, at the time I was interviewing for this job, I had been buying Lundberg's jasmine rice in bulk from my local grocery store for months. And, at the time I had no idea that was even an American brand.
Right.
Like growing up, my mom was always checking the labels and trying to get U.S. grown whenever possible. And admittedly, I had not carried that into my adulthood just yet, but I love Lundberg's jasmine rice, so little shout to them. But now I just don't shut up about it. I'm telling everyone I come across, like, do you know where your rice is coming from? You should be checking your labels and you should be getting U.S. grown rice. And to add on to that, I actually had no idea about how many trade agreements the U.S. has that involve rice. And so that's a subject that it's been so fascinating to start to learn about. And I'm really hoping to, get some more intel on that in the coming months.
Yeah, we could use some more of those too. More rice being eaten at home, and more homegrown rice being eaten, and more trade agreements. Speaking of Willenborg, a great California brand. I know you have some trips coming up. As we said, we dragged you to Dallas. You came back to work the following week, which was a good sign. You're going to California Field Day. You're going to be going to the International Rice Festival down in Crowley. Of course, we have the Outlook Conference coming up in December in Nashville. What are you kind of maybe most looking forward to in the short term?
Oh man, I'm really excited for California Field Day because this is going to be my first time seeing a rice field in action, and that, feels like the logical next step.
Right.
For getting immersed in the rice industry. And in general, there's so much that's new. There's so much more for me to learn still. And I'm excited to be in a role where I'm always going to be learning, and there are always going to be new developments that I'm going to need to keep on top of.
Yeah. I love that you said you're already becoming a rice bully, because that's one of those things that, like, Cameron has talked about it before. If somebody dares, if Cameron's at a dinner party and someone says to him, like, where do you work, or tell me, and his wife just is like, ugh, and has to walk away because she knows what's coming. It's going to be like a 45-minute lecture on rice, and I do it. And that term rice bully came from Carl Brothers, who's was a long time, 50 years, spent 50 years at Riceland and retired a few years ago. But he always talked about the importance of being a rice bully and asking, do you know where your rice comes from? And asking servers, now, not on a Saturday night when they're busy and, they're in the weeds or whatever, but like to talk to people and to get people to understand and think about it, because it's not something that people, they don't really know where their food comes from and stuff. So glad to have you on the team of being a rice bully.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. And it makes my kids roll their eyes. Your people around you are going to start to roll their eyes when you start in. But hey, that's, we're putting food on your table too, right? So you gotta put up with it. We're very happy that you're here. We're happy. We look forward to your contributions. I personally do, different viewpoint, both non-rural and younger. You're a little bit younger than me, I think. We'll look into that, and how you're going to kind of put your stamp on USA Rice's communications projects. Here's going to be an early test. Caroline, throw us to our first break.
All right. Stick around. We'll be taking a short break, and when we come back, Mollie Buckler will join us from USA Rice, Missouri.
Okay, welcome back. Caroline is not the only new team member who joined USA Rice this summer. Mollie Buckler, who was recently leading operations for USRPA, another rice association, joined USA Rice after the Missouri Rice Research and Merchandising Council voted to rejoin USA Rice and send their promotion dollars to the USA Rice Council. We will now stop glaring at each other from across rooms, because even though we all worked for the U.S. rice industry, there was a little bit of tension. So Mollie, glad that you're on the team. She's joining us now from her home base in the Boot Heel. Mollie, welcome to both USA Rice and the Rice Stuff podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be
maybe
here.
you laughed when I said glaring, but I mean, I remember distinctly glaring at you, but I don't know, maybe you didn't.
You might remember that, Michael, but I certainly never glared at you. I was always kind. Okay. I hope you feel, but
I do. I feel it now. But anyway, yeah. Okay.
All right. So Mollie, listeners just heard my origin story where agriculture and rice didn't really feature, but that's not the case for you. So could you tell folks a bit about your background?
Yeah, so ag features, it doesn't, right? So I live in Sikeston, Missouri, like Michael said, in the Boot Heel, in rice country, have farmers in my family. But when I left Sikeston to go to Mizzou, I had no intentions of working in ag when I graduated high school, and certainly even no intentions of coming back to Southeast Missouri. So I ended up with a degree in classical studies as my undergrad, kind of with the intention of, I'll go to grad school, I'll go to law school. But I also interned at the state capitol and got really interested in higher ed policy. And so also ended up going to grad school at Mizzou in education leadership and policy analysis, but kind of got sucked into the alumni and fundraising world. And that's where I spent the first 10 years of my career. So first job out of school was at Alabama, Roll Tide, it gets in your blood. And then went back to Mizzou and worked at Mizzou Alumni Association for 6 years. And so that was a great start, but I was kind of at the point where I was wondering what was next, and had a rice farming member of my family say, hey, I know that Missouri Rice Council and USRPA have this job opening. I think you'd be a great fit, and it's remote, so you could do it from Columbia. And I think that's really what led me to kind of be like, okay, that might translate. Quickly learned that was not true. It was remote, but definitely from rice country. But we took the leap, and the rest is history. So it really was the best decision I could have made, I think, both professionally and for my family. And it translated really well, right? So a lot of my career was really just based on relationship building and event planning. And I still had kind of a legislative thread tied in. And so it fit really nicely into the ag and trade association space. So like I said, live in Sikeston. I have 2 boys, live here with my husband, who also comes from a farming family, but in mid-Missouri. And so primarily raising cattle and turkeys, so a little different than the flatlands and row crops of Southeast Missouri.
So, Mollie, like Caroline, you got thrown into USA Rice by joining us in Dallas this summer. Of course, it was not your first rice meeting by far. You already knew a lot of the characters there, but what kind of expectations did you have heading in, and did the group meet those expectations, exceed them, fall short? How was it?
Yeah. So like Caroline, my first day was July 1st. So I was really grateful that the summer meetings were essentially our first full week of work, because I felt like, even though, yes, I knew lots of familiar faces in that room, I knew there were going to be lots of folks I needed to meet as well. And it was really nice to kind of get to do that right off the bat. And while I do think I'm more of kind of a rose-colored glasses kind of person, an optimistic person, I also recognize there might be some skeptics in that room that were kind of like, this girl has worked for the other rice organization for 5 years and she's coming on board, but what's up with that? Who does she think she is? And so, getting to meet them right off the bat was really important to me and really good. But I think the warm reception I've felt so far has been kind of twofold. One, I just kind of try to approach life with kindness and integrity and honesty. And that's what I've just continued to do here. Be yourself and do good work and let the rest follow has kind of always been my motto, and that has worked well for me. And then I also think both the USA Rice staff and members who do know me have been really instrumental in taking the lead and taking the charge of being welcoming and kind of mirroring that for the rest of the folks who might not know me as well. So I really do appreciate that, probably more than I can even put into words here.
So we're starting to understand why I glared at you and you did not glare at me.
Exactly.
You have those rose-colored glasses and you approach everything positively. And I approach everything. I'm positive that my cynicism is well placed. But anyway, all right, forget all that. So,
it's a balance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad that Dallas was welcoming, for both of you. How's the transition to USA Rice, the work side of it going? I imagine you have access to more resources, but what are you hearing from folks out in the field? I know you've done some field days actually as we're recording this, just coming on the we're recording this on the heels of a few field days that you've been to. Yeah. So what are you hearing from folks on the ground?
Yeah, we are in the thick of field day season, with Missouri Rice Councils being maybe the day that this comes out, right? But I don't know that I can really overstate how seamless of a transition this has been. That also sounds maybe a little rose-colored glasses, but it has been truly a blessing. I think, the process of getting here was not without heartache and a lot of hard conversations and weighing a lot of hard decisions, right? Not just for me personally, but for the Missouri Rice Council, for the industry. And I have loved working with the people that I've gotten to work with over the last 5 years. But as Missouri Rice Council was making their decision, I just kind of tried to keep my eye on the ball, so to speak, and and really focus on what the right thing was to do, both for me personally, both for, Missouri, for the rice industry at large. And I really think the seamlessness that we've seen over the last few weeks is just a sign that we are moving in the right direction, right? That this was the right thing for everybody, just evidence that we're on the right path. And so that's really exciting and encouraging to me. And I hope that that's encouraging to the industry as a whole too. So on the ground, I would say since the decision was announced, the reception has been largely positive. There's always a couple skeptics or folks who are, on the other side of the decision. But I would say largely the farmers that I've talked to, even ones that are not necessarily super involved at the national level or with the politics of the industry, are positive and are excited about the move. So that also reaffirms, I think, my confidence that we're moving in the right direction.
I think it's a good point too. I mean, sometimes because we're in the thick of it, in the thick of managing, every day, and we think about it every day, we have to remember that a lot of the people who we serve, our constituents,
Exactly.
or their farmers, or millers, or merchants, they're not thinking about it. They don't know the difference between the two groups necessarily, and we think about it a lot. And so it's important to kind of remember that these folks, at the end of the day, they just want us to help them, with their markets and being able to move their product and live and stuff. So it's important to kind of remember that. So that perspective is good.
And speaking of transitions, Mollie, in addition to grower relations, you are going to be working on Asia export markets for USA Rice. So that's kind of a switch for you, right? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So a switch in hemispheres a little bit, because for the last 5 years, I have been more focused on Western Hemisphere markets. And so I'd say out of all of this transition, learning those Asian markets is going to be my biggest learning curve. Of course, I have a basic knowledge of the markets, but really getting to know those folks, relationship building there will be is top priority for me right now, for sure. But I am very familiar with the processes, right, of market development, of the USDA, Foreign Ag Service world, and the alphabet soup that is MAP and RAP and AFTPP and all those programs that we utilize to do market development. So I think it'll be a great fit. So I'm already planning my first trips to Asia this fall after we get through field day season and everything. But I'm really looking forward to it. And that side of the team and those folks on the other side of the world have been really welcoming too.
So exciting. So as we discussed earlier, I'm new to ag and trade associations. And as someone who's been around rice a lot longer than I have, do you have any advice for me about how I can become more effective for the industry?
Yeah, I love this question. I thought about it for a long time. And I think my answer really would be almost the same, even if we worked in a different industry to some extent, or the beginning of my answer at least, because it's all about relationships, right? Getting to know people, letting them get to know you. Because I think there are some people that we all work with in our careers that are just kind of a chapter or, a page in a story. But then there are people that you don't realize it, but will truly be a thread throughout decades of your career. So what came to mind for me was on Monday, I was at the University of Missouri's Fisher Delta Research Center field day and breakfast. And at that breakfast, I saw former State Senator Kurt Schaefer, who was my boss when I worked in the state capitol, who's now Missouri's Director of Natural Resources. And so I worked for him, 16 years ago, and I would have never imagined 16 years later kind of still running into each other, but in this capacity that I'm in now. And so you just never know who those people are going to be. And so building relationships like that, it's just one example, but it happens all the time, I think. And so for the rice industry specifically, it's really small. And as you can tell, it has been not without drama for the last 30 plus years, but it is very close knit, and it is a place where you can really get to know people. And so I'd say just take advantage of that, and you never know what people will continue to pop up in your life years down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you, Molly. Really appreciate you being here and sharing your insights. Stick around. When we come back, the mature grain in this tortured pun, Dr. Tim Burcham, who has been working in ag since long before I was born, will join us.
All right, welcome back. Very excited for our next guest. He's the mature grain in our rice life cycle analogy that we're beating to death in this episode. He's had a very long and distinguished career in agriculture. He's got a few agricultural engineering degrees from Mississippi State and a PhD in the same from Clemson University. He's been a professor. He's been the dean of the College of Agriculture at Arkansas State. But I know him as the director of the University of Arkansas's Northeast Rice Research and Extension Center in Harrisburg, Arkansas, just a little bit south of Jonesboro. He recently announced his retirement, much to my dismay, and I'm sure others. He's Dr. Tim Burcham. Dr. Burcham, welcome to The Right Stuff. You know, we've recorded episodes actually at the center, but you've typically been too busy running around, you know, like a one-armed paper hanger, too busy to sit down with us. So I'm glad we actually finally got you on the pod.
Hey, Michael and Caroline, I'm delighted to be with you guys today. And hey, I'm glad I was able to slow down long enough to be on The Right Stuff. It's exciting for me.
Yeah.
And of course, you guys are always welcome here at the center. But yeah, the retirement thing, you know, we got grandkids 5 hours away in 2 different directions and that kind of thing. And so my wife retired in 2024. And so we're looking at the next phase. And so it's been, one of the delights of my life to have been involved in this center and the great staff that we have. But yes, sir, come into the year, Dr. Burcham will be looking at a new chapter.
Excellent. Well, I know well-deserved. So on this episode, Dr. Burcham, we've been talking about people's origin stories. What's yours? Are you originally from Mississippi? What drew you into ag engineering and then pushed you to pursue it all the way through to a doctorate?
Well, Michael, I was actually born in Corinth, Mississippi, and my kinfolk are up there in Northeast Mississippi, but I was raised in Northwest Alabama. My distinct Southern accent probably comes from Northwest Alabama. So I grew up in Phil Campbell, Alabama, and had the opportunity. We have a community college there, and my dad was actually a math and science teacher there. And I did about a year and a half there at Northwest Shoals Community College before I went to Mississippi State University. And as you had indicated there, I got a BS and MS degree there, and then went on to Clemson. You know, some people that were influential to me, Michael, were, Dr. Kenneth Mathis was my advisor when I was at Mississippi State, and I actually did my master's degree work with me. And he taught me the personal side of that faculty-student relationship. He would always have the student club out to his house for hot dog cooks and that kind of thing, and let us all get to know each other. And I really learned what being a full professor, what that meant to guide young people. And then later on, I had a graduate class with Dr. John Hayes, who then went on to Clemson. And so my track to Clemson University was actually following Dr. Hayes, and he was definitely influential in my career in agricultural engineering. I've always had kind of a mechanical bug, Michael. I worked on tractors, did a lot of tractor driving, even though my family wasn't into farming, but I was always in farming, working on my motorcycles. And so I always loved tearing things apart, and sometimes I got them put back together.
Right. Well, can you point to a moment, whether it was a study or experiment or a class, or maybe you mentioned some teachers who you had, something that changed your thinking about things and maybe kind of set your career in motion, or maybe it was just tinkering with the equipment that was around you?
Well, I'm going to point back to that co-op time that I had with John Deere at the Ottumwa Works up in Ottumwa, Iowa. Randy Raper and I were both graduates from Phil Campbell High School, both went to Mississippi State University together. And so we interviewed, we were green as gourds, Michael, from Phil Campbell, Alabama, but we interviewed to become co-op students with John Deere. And at that time, they just had a wonderful co-op program, brought students in from all over the United States, Washington State University, University of Illinois, University of Nebraska, Cornell. And so we were fortunate to have opportunity to go up there and work our way through the entire facility. And if you look at their leadership, you'll often find co-op students in their top leadership areas. And that's because they took us through the entire plant. I mean, we did everything from the shipping dock to making parts to listening how product orders were done. And it really gave us a thorough understanding of those companies. And I think that really, that experience really set me in my career. I mentioned the faculty members, Dr. Mathis and Dr. Hayes, but the co-op experience with John Deere and such a great company was really a seminal moment for me as far as my ag engineering career. And then, of course, I've always been involved in the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers. That's been a key component for me as well, staying involved with my professional society.
Dr. Burcham, ag engineering has obviously changed greatly over the course of your career. Can you talk about how a typical farm approached engineering puzzles when you started out versus what you're seeing today?
Well, Caroline, there have been remarkable changes that have occurred during my career. My graduate work started in '83, and if you'll recall, that was not long after the IBM PC made its debut. And in fact, my master's degree work was using soil tire interface, looking at the pressure at the soil tire interface on a logging skidder. And I had a compact computer. Michael might remember this. Caroline, you're too young, but Michael might remember those suitcase deals that looked like a sewing machine. And we had one of those strapped to the logging skidder with a generator to run the power to it. And we're measuring the interface pressures on that tire in real time. Well, we were right at the front of that, Michael. So I've been able to come through this PC generation, and that was back in the 2 floppy disk days. I mean, if you had 2 floppy disks back then, you were really something special. And now
I'll teach you what a floppy disk is later.
Yeah. You guys can discuss that after the interview. But now we're down to where a jump drive that you put in your pocket is gigabytes or terabytes. We're looking at processing power of instrumentation, whether it's our automobiles. And that's another big change, Caroline. When I was doing the little farming there around my community, these tractors were all analog. I mean, there were wires and there were steel things that attached to your throttle to the fuel pump assembly. There were no digital controls back then. And so everything was associated with the driver. Now, there's some good things and bad things about that. The simplicity of those machines makes them infinitely repairable. And then we get to today where you better have some type of very high-end diagnostic tool to even start working on the equipment. But we've really went through a revolution from that standpoint, from not only the equipment side, but the GPS, geospatial systems that are allowing us to really look at things in a real-time basis, satellite imagery that we can review on a very real-time basis today. So we've come a long ways, and I would say that agricultural engineering has played a very large part in where we are today with the technical aspects of farming today. We still have to put a seed in the ground, and someone still has to tend it, and someone still has to harvest it, and someone still has to put it in a grain bin to get it to that final place where it's landed on our plate. But agricultural engineering has really made huge strides in the efficiency of those operations. I'm very, very proud of the career choice that I made and what that particular area has done for us in the farming community.
Wonderful perspective. And I'm wondering, is there an innovation or an area of study that has most excited you about your work, or if there's a problem that you were most happy to be working on?
Well, again, I'm a techie, Caroline, so the techie side has always fascinated me. I think that the process of coming on board in 2019 for this project as an engineer, I don't think it gets any better than that. In other words, when we got here, you had a farm. I always tell the story. Michael's heard it. I had a pickup truck, a pair of rubber boots, and a shovel. And that's literally what we had when we started here. They purchased the farm, and there was no equipment. There were no buildings or anything like that. So for me, it's been, transformational. And I would say, the thrill of my life to be able to, from an engineering perspective, to start with a project, work through that project, and then see it to fruition, has really been, the highlight of my professional career. And I would say that, the learning process for me, even though I'm an engineer and I'm a gadget guy and a techie, I really learned to appreciate what the architectural firms do, what the building contractors do, how things get done. And, what at the end of the day, that takes hundreds, if not thousands, of talented people that all know their craft at the highest level. And so I really, that was an eye opener for me to see, that process on a building of, with this type of scale. So I think the engineering background really put me in a good position to enjoy that aspect as we built the building, and also to help contribute where I was able to.
Well, it's a beautiful facility. I mean, I remember I've been there. I was there when it was just an empty field, a muddy field, and you were there with your truck and your boots and your shovel. But it really is a state-of-the-art facility. There's an emphasis not just on research, right, but on education as well. And it's not just education of those in the ag community, but of what I call civilians, of which, of course, I am technically a civilian as well, right? But can you talk about that aspect of the mission of the Northeast Rice Research and Extension Center? Why is that education for civilians so important, and how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, Michael, I mean, that was certainly is something that's been very important to us. And, if you'll remember from those formative days when we talked about the project and we, talked to the Arkansas Rice Research and Promotion Board membership, there was a strong sentiment there that we needed to have an education outreach program that worked really with, starting at first grade all the way through 12th, but maybe concentrated on that first through fifth grade area. And even though the entire economy in Northeast Arkansas, we're right here in the Arkansas Delta, where, the majority of the rice in the state is grown in this 5-county area up here, and a lot of different row crops, 3.2 million acres of soybean this year. So the economy is certainly driven by agriculture. And yet we still have young people that think that maybe their food comes from the grocery store. And I think that was one of the key concerns for not only the board members, but also, it's a concern for us in agriculture. There seems to be a disconnection between where our food comes from and, the relative plentifulness that we have, that we're blessed with in our country. And so the board had challenged us with regard to an educational component. And when you look at our vision and mission statement, that educational component was key right there, not only to have a research facility, but to have an educational component. And I think we've met that requirement beautifully. Hired Ashlyn Ussery in 2021 before we had a building or anything, Michael. We had the foresight to go ahead and start building the curriculum for that program. And then whenever we went through the design with the architects, there was a definite component there where we actually structurally changed elements of the building strictly due to the education component. So when you look at this facility today, Ashlyn has a classroom that's specific for the young people. She has a greenhouse that's specifically for the young people. And then next to that, she has the Jennifer Cox Smith teaching kitchen that allows them to do tasting, look at aromatic varieties versus non-aromatic varieties, talk about how important rice is to cultures throughout the world and the globe. And so I think that education component was so important, and it's something that you would see here at this station that you might not find at the other stations. And there was certainly a deliberate vision and mission for that. And I'm excited to say that today we're certainly entertaining young people throughout the region right now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I see photos of young people there all the time, learning and looking at that big video wall and learning how rice is grown and what goes into it. But then the teacher kitchen, obviously, and then the classrooms are such a huge part of it.
Yeah, there's
Um,
nothing like eating some rice while you're there, Michael. Yeah.
Absolutely, of course. So, one of the things that I find interesting in just thinking, kind of about life in general is like egos and personalities and how much they play into it. And of course, I'm in Washington, D.C., which is like the ego capital of the universe, right? But they can often derail projects, right? And I remember, as you were talking about, when you mentioned the board, you're talking about the Arkansas Rice Research and Promotion Board,
Yes,
right? That is in charge of distributing and managing the funds that come in from the checkoff programs and TRQ money and other things, and devoting some of it to research and some of it to promotion. And when the center was being proposed, there were elements of it, of course, that were controversial. You were talking about a good deal of money, a big commitment, right? So there were board members and administration officials maybe clashed at times. There was a lot of money at stake. All of it is understandable. They want to be responsible stewards of the money. The administration wants to deliver for the community and for the industry. There's a set dedicated to research and a set dedicated to promotion. But at the end of the day, money is money, and the decisions of the board can impact everybody, both as applicants and beneficiaries. So there was often tension in the air, I think, at some of these meetings, and it was going in every direction. It was going from everybody to everybody, right? Yeah. And then the university brought you in, and I remember the very first ARRPB meeting that you presented at, and there was still that bit of skepticism in there. I won't say I rolled my eyes, but maybe one of my colleagues did. But then you started talking about the center and about what it could be, what it needed to be, and what it would be. And it was like none of those other meetings, none of those other things happened, right? The passive aggressive remarks, the table pounding, all that stuff just went away, and with you at the helm. And I think, I don't know if you're the ag ego whisperer or what, but, there was just something about you leading this project that got it through past all the nonsense to just deliver for folks. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I don't know how you did it.
Well, Michael, thanks for that compliment. I'll take the ag eco whisperer any day of the week. Well, the first thing I would say is, whenever the opportunity to take on a project like this, the first thing I did is, I prayed about that decision. I enjoyed what I was doing at Arkansas State University, and I was dean of the College of Agriculture. I was the interim dean of the newly formed College of Engineering and Computer Science, and was really excited about the opportunities that had. But as an engineer, again, the opportunity to do something from the ground up was something that really intrigued me. So, when I take that to the Lord in prayer, I mean, I got peace about that. There was a peace about that. And, I wasn't in some of those tension meetings that you're talking about, Michael. I mean, to be honest with you, I'll just say I was quite ignorant of that. Maybe if I'd been less ignorant of that, we wouldn't have a center today. I don't know. But after I had peace about it from a prayer standpoint, and then started talking with our division leadership, Dr. Mark Cochran at the time, and his leadership team, as well as members of the Rice Research and Promotion Board that encouraged me at that time. And I just had a complete peace about it. And so, when I went into that and we went to the board, remember I brought that notebook in there where we literally put the vision and mission statement before them, and we had everybody to agree to that vision and mission statement. And, so when I went forward with the project, I mean, my mindset was not, could it become a reality, but it will become a reality. And so when you start from that standpoint, from a standpoint of faith, and I think that rubs off on people, because there was never in my mind anything but success. And when you come into the meeting and we're reporting to not only our division leadership, but to the board, I think that they feel that it rubs off on them. I hope it rubbed off on you, Michael. Maybe you didn't roll your eyes near as many times later on.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. Feeding me rice helped.
Exactly. But, I had peace about that. And so I can truthfully say that, when I went to the board meetings, There was never an anticipation of fear about those board meetings. There was an anticipation of being able to share the remarkable progress of what we were doing. And again, I mentioned this when I did my little sign-off deal at our field day the other day. I believe everybody on the board, as well as everybody on the division leadership team, also demonstrated great faith as we set out for this wonderful project. They all believed in the project. And then once we got everybody on board, it was just then jumping over the hurdles to get to the finish line. And so I think when you have, from me, the perspective is everybody's voice needs to be heard. Your ideas may be good, but you need to listen to everybody's perspective. And I think that when you look at the center, you look at our vision and mission statements that we've checked off virtually everything that we said we were going to do in the building. Those members having that faith and having the camaraderie that we had at that time was a tremendous blessing for this project to become a reality. And so I'm, faith, just step out on faith. And I believe that everything that happened was a result of a lot of people that were involved having faith.
Dr. Burcham, what will you miss most about what the center is doing?
Well, I'll certainly miss the research, extension, and and the outreach activities, education programs that we have here. But the most important thing for me is my colleagues. We're still a very small team here at the station, and but listen, those people to a person, they've all stepped up and share the same dedication and exuberance for what we do here as I do. It's easier for me to do it because I've been able to see it go from scratch to where we are today. But many of the team members that we have here today have been along for that entire period. Michael, I've been sharing, even my hourly employees. I've had one young man that's been with me 4 years, another one that's been with me 3 years, and a retired postman that's been with me 4 years. I've had zero turnover on an hourly side. That's unheard of. In any area right now, much less agriculture. And to a person, whether we're talking about full-time staff or we're talking about hourly employees, everybody buys into the mission. When I tell them we've got a tour group coming, they've got other things that is going on out at the farm, but they stop and take time, and they reflect, the passion that we have here for the center. So it's the people for me, Caroline. I mean, and we're not going to be leaving Jonesboro immediately. I don't know what the future will hold there, but I've had the blessing to be interfaced with these people that are around me that have lifted me up when I'm down, and really share that passion, and it comes through with every group that comes to this station.
And if you had another 40 years of work, what do you think you would chase?
Man, that's a great question, Caroline. My kids and my wife say I should have been a used car salesman. I don't know. I don't know what that says about me. But, here's the thing. If I had another 40 years, I don't think it would be any different. It would just be that the technologies around me would change. I'm built off of innovation, whether it's innovation to build this center. You look back at my career as an academician, I've built academic programs that are still in existence. In other words, I've left a trail of academic programs that are doing very, very well at Mississippi State, at UT Martin, at Arkansas State University. And I'm very proud of that mark that has been left with new programs because they're serving agriculture for us today. But when you look at that innovation today, there are really a lot of exciting and sometimes scary innovations that are occurring right now. We got genetic engineering aspects going on now. We got AI and autonomous vehicles, terrestrial robots, human robots. Every morning in my reading, I'm seeing more about, human robotics. We got nanotechnologies that are coming forward. We've got the potential for practical fusion energy that's would unleash a whole new era from an energy standpoint. And the list just goes on and on. They're all fascinating fields. But I'm thankful that the Lord allowed me to apply my talents in producing food, fiber, and fuel for a growing world. And, I think that's a notable calling, and I've been blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah, certainly. It makes me think too. I mean, I wonder, do you feel, because you kind of straddled that, and I did too, the floppy. I mean, I remember doing term papers on a typewriter, right?
Yeah.
And not even an electric typewriter, but a
Yes,
regular
sir.
manual typewriter, right? But I'll tell you what a typewriter is later. But the thing is, do you feel like some of the, maybe, whether it's the old school skill or intuition, that you fear that it's being lost as maybe students and farmers today are kind of relying more on some of this technology? Is there some kind of caveat in there that you would leave folks with?
Well, yeah, of course, as an innovator, I certainly, I'm usually I'm at the bleeding edge of things, Michael. I'm one of those persons that's going to be trying things maybe before it's stable. But there are things that I'm very concerned about, and particularly in the AI generation that we're moving into. I use AI every day. Again, I'm an innovator, so I use that tool to make me a better employee and to do better things. I'll give you an example, Michael. Whenever I'm over with my farm crew, I'll pull out 100-foot tape and I'll tell them to, okay, you need to start here at 0 and walk down to 100 and count your paces. And they don't have a clue what I'm trying to teach them, but the reality is that I measure many things on the farm by pacing, and that's so that we can do quick measurements out in the field. I mean, you don't want to go to a GIS every time you want to do something like that, and they're amazed at what utility that you can be gained from that. I think that also in this AI area that some things that just can't be replaced is leadership skills, wisdom, that human intuition. Even though these models are getting really good, I think that our students are going to need to concentrate on those things that can't be replicated, in ones and zeros in a digital packet or on our cell phone. So I do worry about that. I would say that education as a whole, they're going to have to rethink and recalibrate maybe some expectations that they have viewed in the past. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day. Michael, if I handed you a stone tablet and a spike from a railroad and said to take some notes, you would be appalled. But we probably might still be doing that figuratively in some of our education processes. And so it's going to be a big challenge. There's no question about it. But I'm also convinced that humanity can meet those challenges. And so we'll probably recalibrate as we move through the AI age that we really have we're just at the front edge of that.
So you've spent 40 years in a field that is defined by curiosity and learning. How do you plan to satisfy that itch now that you're going into retirement?
Wow, Carolyn, that one is that's a deep diving question for sure. I don't have any definite plans right now. One would be, as I'd mentioned, being able to visit with my grandkids and stay a little bit longer, not have to be worried about being back at the farm, not have to worry about that we're right in the middle of harvest season, we're right in the middle of planting season. The farming environment is one that from the time we put the seed in the ground to the time we put it in the grain bin, there's work after that, I might add, but it really is a 24/7 type operation. I'm going to look to the Lord for what he would have me to do next. I'm not going to sit back in a lazy boy. We'll just be looking and turning the page to a new chapter in my life. And I want to continue to be an asset to my community, to my state, to my country going forward, and but just enjoy a little more flexibility as I go forward as well.
Maybe no alarm clock.
That'll
see. Be the. Well, Dr. Burcham, this has been a wonderful conversation. Obviously, we can barely scratch the surface. We're talking about somebody with a career like yours. I wanted to give you kind of the last word. Tell listeners whatever you like. If there's something you wish that you had been told maybe 40 years ago, or maybe the thing you're most proud of, or you want something to think about, that for folks to think about. I think everyone looks at you in the community who know you, and those who don't should look at you as a leader, as a thought leader. And so the floor is yours.
Well, Michael, thank you. And Caroline, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come on the right stuff today. The word that comes to mind for me, Michael, is I've been blessed. My career has taken me from a student at Mississippi State University over to Clemson University. My first professional job was UT Knoxville. Loved that area, the foothills of the Appalachians, the go ball spirit there. Back to my alma mater at Mississippi State University. From Mississippi State University to UT Martin, back in the Tennessee system, and then back over here to Arkansas since 2013 with Arkansas State University and the University of Arkansas. And the key thing I would say about each one of those professional stops for me has been, the blessing that I've received with the people that have been around me. To a location wherever I've been, people have been great. People have always supported the vision and mission of whatever I was doing. And I think that from a standpoint of a career, when you can look back and say that at each place that you've been, you've had people that have touched your life and you've had the opportunity to touch their life, maybe enrich them in their professional careers. I don't think it gets any better than that. And so I'm blessed.
Well said, Dr. Tim Burcham. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you. Again, thanks for having me on today.
So that was a really great conversation. I was glad we were able to catch up with Tim. And he mentioned that he's got some hourly employees who've been with him for 3 years, 4 years. And that's something that's, I think, as he said, it's uncommon, and it is uncommon, right? I mean, I think there was a period, in the post-World War II period, Americans thought about lifetime jobs, right? You being with an employer for 20 years was not uncommon. And in part, it was maybe because that's how long you had to be with them to get access to your pension. A lot of those jobs were probably union jobs, but in general, people didn't, kind of job hop as much. You got a job at a place and you kind of expected to stay there, and they expect you to stay there. So I've been at USA Rice now for 13 years, and which is the longest I've ever worked anywhere. The only thing I did longer was be in school, right? And I think it's a testament to the industry and kind of the feeling that we have working for folks here. And so when I mentioned at the top, that Deborah Willenborg had left after 14 years work, we worked side by side every day for 14 years. It's a blow, right? It's a tough one. And, we have spent time traveling together, talking each other off the ledge. It was a problem when we were both on the ledge at the same time, but we worked through it. But it was just such a important, she filled such an important role here and was here for so long, as I said, just made such a huge impact on me personally, but also on the industry, I think, and on USA Rice and what was happening here. So she will certainly be missed. The industry, I think the folks who know her, that there's been an outpouring of congratulations and warm wishes for her as when she announced her retirement, and say we'll miss her. There's nothing like working with Deborah, having her as a sounding board, as a therapist, whatever it was. It was just, she was a great partner and was here for a long time, and we appreciate it and hope the rice industry does as well. I know that they do. Well, that was just kind of the little hobby horse that I wanted to ride for a little bit, to just, have people remember how appreciative we are of Deborah, of her impact and what she did here. And we're entering the Caroline years. And so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, so thank you again to our guests, Dr. Tim Burcham, Mollie Buckler, and you, Caroline, although you're not really a guest anymore, you're a co-host. So we don't have to be nice to you anymore. You get your own water kind of thing. But anyway, all right. And thank you for listening to The Rice Stuff for USA Rice. I'm Michael Klein.
And I'm Caroline Slack. We are online at thericestuffpodcast.com. You can email us at podcast@usarice.com, and we hope you will. We also hope you will subscribe and tell folks about us and leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts. It makes a big difference.
The Rice Stuff is produced by USA Rice and Human Factor and was engineered by a lot of people, because it's going to take a lot of work to get this episode under control. Thanks, everybody.